I'm going to run through this fairly quickly, although it doesn't represent 6 or 7 months of research. So I've been looking into peer boards for the better part of this year. I've engaged with some of the top peer board firms around the world. And the thing with the peer boards is they're very effective worldwide and across industries. This is quite unique in that we're talking about a peer board for a single industry. So some of the research we're putting up here refers globally to firms, not just peer firms. So one of the big things around building your own business is, are you making critical decisions alone? And while most of the successful financial planning firms don't go it solo. So here's the problem. The problem is isolation. The flip side of the control coin and managing my own destiny tends to be isolation, two sides of the same coin. So as a business and a practice owner, who do you really talk to? And this is a little bit of tongue in cheek, so bear with me. Your team often has its own agenda. Maybe they don't understand the bigger picture. Frankly, like mine, your spouse is probably tired of hearing you talk about it. And your competitors, well, that's where the conversation comes in, because are your competitors in name actually your competitors in spirit? And that's what we're going to just unpack here quickly. So when you're in isolation, you get stuck in the weeds, daily firefighting. Instead of working on the business, you're working in the business. Guesswork strategy, making high-stakes decisions on compliance, tech, hiring, often in isolation or in a vacuum. The risk of burnout. I've yet to meet a successful young FSP owner that isn't exhausted, doing it all. If you know that old story, if you want it done properly, do it yourself. Blind spots, and this is a massive thing. When you're so busy and when you're so engaged, a human bias is you don't see your own blind spots. And the problem in isolation is there's no one there to challenge your assumptions. And that's where this sort of peer council starts to come into its own. So what we're putting together to launch in the new year is a dual component system. Stop the guessing, start executing, combining peer intelligence, but with accountable coaching. One without the other has its pitfalls, and I'll take you through that over the next few slides. So the collective brains trust. We want to create an affiliate board. This is people from companies within the same industry that on the face of it may appear to be competitors, but in reality, you're not competitors. The chances of Ian losing a client to Tom because Tom understands a bit more about Ian's business, we know is highly remote. Clients go where relationships and service are. And if Tom loses a client to Colin, it's not because Colin helped Tom, it's because Colin wasn't doing his job. And so the client was on his way anyway, and it was just a nudge. So an affiliated board, it's a confidential vault. We want to put 8 to 10 non-competing, but non-competing at an ego level, successful financial planners. We have a monthly board meeting, and here we cover exact industry challenges. They put on the table, they discussed, it could be compliance, asset growth, tech stacks. And what we then do is we leverage decades of in the trenches experience across all the people in the room. So someone might have really made significant progress on CRM. Someone else has been putting a lot of time into compliance. Why go and relearn that whole wheel? These are your colleagues, friends in the industry, people you meet up at conferences, we drink together, we don't fight over clients. So when I was on the board at the FIA, I spent an inordinate amount of time helping other FSPs. We offered to buy FSPs that didn't join us, and for years later, I was still helping those FSPs, because at the end of the day, we had a vested interest in the success of everyone. I don't want to succeed at the expense of Ian or Colin. I want us all to be successful. And this is where the ego comes in. It's not about ego. It's not about, well, I've got more AUM than other. If I can help another firm do well, grow, become sustainable, that's in my nature. That's the way I am, and that's the intention of this board. So the second part, however, is the tough part. It's the trusted advisor, the strategic coach. When you have a peer board meeting, you get massive breadth in terms of discussion. The one-on-ones, go into the depth of it, the unpacking of the steps, setting accountability, setting deadlines, maybe even unpacking some personal stuff, which is not the preserve of the general board meeting. So we move from good ideas in the board to execution planning. We'll have a 12-month strategic arc. We'll look at four areas of the business: people, process, profit, and your personal goals. Because at the end of the day, if you're building a successful business, it's got to be successful not only in terms of the business, but in terms of you as an individual. You as an individual have got to enjoy success. You've got to enjoy balance. So we do both of those, and we make sure that we drive real results. So how do they work together? The affiliated board is the what. We bring your toughest challenges to the board. You get 10 brilliant industry-specific solutions and ideas from different people. And let me tell you, I've sat in these things, and let me tell you how it works. You present a challenge to your board, and then we go around the table. And the first guy says, well, you know, I had this 2 years ago. This is how we dealt with it. Someone else in the room picks up on that. It triggers something, and they build on that, and the next guy builds on it. And the person who's presented the challenge, making extensive notes, and comes away with not just 10 individual inputs, but a collection of 10 individual inputs that mold each other. Someone else in the room might go, you know what, I had this problem 2 years ago, and I dealt with it. But this solution that we've discussed today makes much more sense. So whether you're giving or whether you're learning, the upside and the reward to you is fantastic. But after that, in the one-on-one session, we take all the ideas, we work through which one works for your business, we set out an action day plan, and we hold you to that action plan. So one of the things we do in a peer board is when you arrive at the next session and you had a challenge from the previous session, you give feedback on that challenge. You've got to actually stand up there in front of your peers and say, okay, guys, I took the following steps, 1, 2, 3. The positive outcome was this, but the flip side applies. You could say, actually, you know what? In the last month, I didn't address this problem. Now the question from your peers is, okay, well, why not? You need to unpack the why. If it was because you were too busy working in the business instead of on the business, your peers are going to point that out to you. And so it puts a little bit of peer pressure in terms of working on the business as opposed to in the business. Peer pressure in our industry is not about who's got the biggest revenue or who's got the biggest AUM. It's about who's built the more sustainable business and who's got the best balance between their business and their private life. That's where the challenge is. That's the competition, not for clients. And that's the whole point behind a board like this. So the board meeting, we talk about wins and check-ins, accountability on last month's goals. I just spoke about that. Then a member will come up with a problem and we do a deep dive into that problem. Hot seat number 2, we can have a deep dive into a second problem, or alternatively, if there's a common problem across the group, say, I'll pick a silly one, non-solicitation agreements. We may well research that and present a specialist paper just on non-solicitation agreements because everyone has an interest in it, as opposed to having a second deep dive. And the takeaways from that is a new 30-day one thing goals. Over the next 30 days, you just need to do one thing. And at the next board meeting, we repeat that. The one-on-one, we cover different things over the different quarters. So quarter 1 and quarter 2, we'll talk about the foundation of you and your business, your one-year plan, your financials, your scalable model. In Q3, we'll talk about marketing, sales, systemization. But by Q4, we're already focusing on succession, personal leadership, long-term legacy, and next year, because next year we repeat the process again. So this is not a cost, this is an investment. Expected outcomes, more profit, more time, more value, more relationships, a better community. I can list a number more outcomes over there. I just got a testimonial from a client the other day, and she wrote this lovely testimonial. And at the end of it, she stopped and she said, hold on, here's a one-liner for you. This is either an investment or an expense. It depends on your perspective. And then she said, this is the best investment my firm ever made. And that's a referral from another company, which should be up soon. So then the facilitator, as a fellow planner, industry veteran, we've been through these challenges. We don't want to just run meetings. We want to be a committed strategic partner. We'll hold you accountable, challenge your assumptions, be the one person who's dedicated to your success. I have another client in the Cape, and he puts it like this. He says, at his CEO level, he loves his team, but they haven't been in his position. So he pays me a retainer to be his sounding board. So he talks about his strategic sounding board, and every month we go through volumes of stuff. So what initially was supposed to be, one or two things a month we discuss has just become a steady flow. And all we do is we bounce stuff back together and come up with solutions collectively. We've built new models for them, acquisition models. We've been through their marketing approach. We've looked at their value propositions. Last night, he sends me an acquisition he wants to do. Can I do a due diligence on it? And so what started just as a trusted advisor has become a go-to sounding board. And that's how it builds. Okay, so that was a lot shorter than I anticipated, but we want to form the first, and Jason, just to touch on what you said earlier, we actually want this to be invitation-only board meetings. I don't want to put it out on social media and multimedia and just get people potentially phoning. We want it to be exclusive. If we can get one board of 8 to 10 people up in the first quarter and a second board after that, then at that point, I'd like to pause it and we just focus on those 2 boards, those 16 FSPs. Jason, I'm going to just exit this presentation, okay? So we want it to be exclusive. We want it to be companies that are similar in structure and size. I mean, I don't want to take Aon Financial Planning and put them together with Bob's Brokers, because that's not going to yield the value we need. And if any firms are called Bob Brokers, I apologize in advance. One day I'm going to say that, and some guy in the front row is going to be, but I'm Bob's Brokers. So I just want to apologize in advance. So that's what we want to put together. We want to handpick people. And when I spoke to Jason about the concept, he felt that the panel of wise advisors was potentially a fantastic, a small, fantastic network that we could engage with. I've spoken to you about a dozen FSPs that I've worked with over the years, either with, for, in, and literally we've got 11 out of 12 positive responses. The one individual has already done something not similar, but which he feels yields the same value, and that's fine. So I said, Alan, that's fine, you carry on. So we've got 11 positive responses. So ideally, we'd like to get between 16 and 20 firms on board during the first half of next year. There are no monthly contracts. It works or it doesn't work. If after a while, and by the way, we set all our contracts up like this. If I get to the end of the month and I send a client a bill and he doesn't feel there's value, we shake hands, we stay friends. That's just the way we run our business. If there's no value add, that's it. It's a done deal and we stay friends. So we start the boards, we get people on. We've got structured agendas for the year at both the one-on-one and the business level. And we'll facilitate and continue to develop this concept collectively. And that, in short, is the concept of a peer board, but specifically within one specific industry, being financial planning.